Well, hello.
Good evening, my friend.
Well, hello, Mike Manley. How are you, sir?
Pretty good today. How are you?
All right,
Jamar Nicholas.
Mike, you're looking good. The beard looks tight, man. I like the edge up.
Yeah, I just edged it today.
Looking good, bro. How's your neighborhood with the snow? If anybody knows, in the East Coast, we had like a 3-day snowstorm.
And more to come, they say now, next weekend.
Yeah, it's supposed to snow again.
Donner Party weekend in Philly.
Yeah, what up, Raph? Thanks for hanging out with us tonight.
Choose the haunches you want to bite into.
So are you at the point where you need to like get the roof rake and like pull down snow off of your roof?
No, but I did hear several times a day because the sun was out. You hear like it was like some big chunk of ice was falling. But I'm from Michigan, so it was a nice snowstorm, but it's certainly not like the worst snowstorms that I experienced as a kid. And the big storm we had here in Philly in '96, which was like 31 inches or something like that.
That's what she said. Yeah, that storm in '96. I remember our roof caved in my apartment.
Really?
Yeah, you could like look out and see the sky.
And the snowman reached in like, oh.
It was bad news, man. But hopefully everybody out there is okay and that you have power so you can view Pencil to Pencil tonight. Welcome to the podcast.
Keep pedaling.
El Jabal says, join me in North Carolina. It's mid-50s here and no snow. What? Might have to come visit, bro. Welcome to your favorite pandemic podcast. This is Pencil to Pencil, brought to you every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. And we are always sponsored by our good friends at Graphics League. Look up there and see the John. You know the John right there. Graphics League creates Clip Studio Paint, the comic book artist's best friend. I
thought you were my best friend.
Well,
Clip Studio Paint never borrows $5. So.
That's very true. but I also don't crash on you either. So
that's right.
You know what? Before I say that, I don't think I've had any crashes in Clip Studio. Remember, did you ever use Painter?
Mm-hmm.
And that thing crashed like it was its job. I remember that. But that's really important, especially when you're trying to do a deadline-oriented work.
It does not like Zoom though. Like today, I was zooming, and if you have Photoshop open in Zoom, if you have Clip Studio Paint open in Zoom, it's just like eventually I have to quit Clip Studio and restart it. Like somehow the memory gets all memory shit. They like start fighting over the memory
with a net and a trident.
Yeah.
Also, let's give a shout out to our other sponsor, John Morrow, our favorite publisher over at Tomorrow's Publishing, who publishes Mike's great magazine Draw, which I'm also a columnist for.
And John has I think he had an 80 or 85% off sale. I know he had it last week when we were on the podcast. He had it, and I don't know if he still has it, but he was getting rid of a bunch of sale on a bunch of back issues of there was the Best of Draw, and then there was a bunch of the Modern Masters that Eric did. So,
all that stuff is worth you picking up, especially the Modern Masters. Draw is always evergreen. And are we going to have the Best of the Krusty Critic volume, Mike Manley?
We could, maybe we could make a custom PDF.
There you go.
You can make your own special chapter. The crustiest of the critics.
It's so crusty you can't even open it. You can't open the file. So thanks for all our sponsors for the continued support, and thank you, dear penciliers, for checking in with us tonight. We have a really special guest, my good bud, and people tried to check me on this, Mike, because I say my best bud all the time. But if you know me in real life, you know that I'm everybody's best friend. So I never lie. My best bud Jerry Kraft is joining us tonight. Jerry is an old friend, and he's a boulder mover he's a very, very important person in kid lit in book publishing world. His book New Kid won the Newbery Medal Award just last year, and we've moved on to another one now. So I don't know if Jerry had to trade it in like a title belt, give it to the
somebody came over and
had to put it back in the FedEx box. All right, your year's over, Kraft. Put it in the box. And his newest book, Class Act, is just shooting up the charts. New York Times bestselling author. And Jerry has had his fingers in many pies over the years. So we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. Mike and Jerry were vibing before we started the record button. So we're going to have lots to get to. And please, we want to hear from you guys. If this is your first time watching, we do this live. So if you're watching us on YouTube, go to the chat and type in some stuff. If you have any questions for Jerry or Mike or myself, please put it in. We'll try to get it on screen. For our people over on Facebook, in the comments, go ahead and drop some love, and we'll try to get it on screen. All right, let's bring them on in. Hey, Jerry.
Hey, guys. What's up?
Hello.
Now, do I always have to say thank you for having me? Because that's what everyone that comes on says, just in anything.
No.
I'm trying to go with something different,
No.
What are you going to say?
Hey,
nice to be had. Nice to be had.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you know what? Let's start off with something really special, because we've talked in the past about one of our favorite viewers and artists who hangs out with us a lot, the notorious JRD, J. Robert Deeds. You know about JRD, Jerry Kraft.
I do. I only know from the show. I feel like we are best buds now because of our 6 degrees of separation. Actually, 1 degree of separation, which is you.
Well, you know they call me the Kevin Bacon of comic books.
I do know that.
JRD says, full disclosure, I bought New Kid to read before this show, Jerry Kraft. Loved it and immediately bought Class Act. They need more awards.
Wow.
I love it.
Well, thank you, JRD.
And he gets in a good evening. How are you?
Yeah.
So how are you, Jerry?
I am well. I heard you talking about the snow.
Yeah.
I did have to get out and shovel today. And, it's really weird because if I leave my car on the street, then the plow comes and plows my car in. It puts it behind that 3-foot barrier of ice, like one of those concrete things on the highway.
Yeah.
But then if I take my car off the street, then they push that thing onto my sidewalk. And then I can't clear my sidewalk for like days until like spring thaw. So now I've got like a 3-foot mound going down my entire sidewalk. So I think from now on, I would just leave my car on the street.
Yeah, it's one of the almost like a winter sport is the art of save seats in Philadelphia.
Well, I was just about to say that. I drove in Philly. I was there one year, probably for the African American Children's Book Festival, right? And it was snowing. And I drive by, and all these people have folding chairs.
Yeah.
They're like, hey, wow, free chairs. So I must have brought back about 25 of them. I've got deep chairs, lawn chairs, some umbrellas.
That's
so I don't know what
definitely a
that's
Philly
about.
thing.
I don't know what that's about, but I really appreciate that. Really is the city of brotherly love.
That's about if you move it and we see you move it, cack.
Yeah. You might catch some hot ones.
There are. That was something because from the Midwest we don't have that issue, right? There was no issue of parking like that, but in Philly, there is the issue of parking, and then also if you're on what they call a snow emergency route, which means that you have to move your car. So if you go out there and you shovel out that spot and then you go to work, you got to put your chair in there or somebody will be driving. Oh, thanks, man. They'll pull right in. And you come home from work and like, what? Where'd this guy come from?
So wait, those chairs were for the taking?
No, you got to put those back here.
You got a nice collection of VFW hall chairs.
My backyard, I could have about 40 people over now.
There you go.
My favorite thing is I have a picture of it somewhere. Somebody This was a sign on somebody's car. Oh, it was on the chair in the shoveled out spot that says, "I spent all day shoveling out this spot. If you park here, I'm going to break your effing windows. Have a nice day."
Yeah.
And that's Philly in a nutshell.
Yeah. There you go.
I don't know. I don't know if they do that in New York. If it's just like a Philly thing, but
I've never seen lawn chairs out and stuff, you know. So like I just had to go out and I just pulled into my neighbor's spot that he shoveled out all day. But you know I can take them, so it's not really a big deal, you know.
Is it people you are used to in New York that if you you move it, you lose it kind of a thing? Is that?
I think that's probably it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So aside from that, Jerry, you've had a pretty busy couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to read your author bio with my NPR voice, but it was too long, and I decided I wasn't going to do that. But I think one of the most fantastic things that I enjoy about you is that you've been in the game for a long time, and that's not an age joke. That's just, and we've all been around for a bit, and I believe there's a lot of people who think you're an overnight success, Jerry Crabb.
Yes.
So
yeah, I feel like I wore down the industry's patience. You know, like, Mama, can I have some candy? Mama, can I have some candy? No. Mama, can I have it? No. Mama, can I have it? No. Mama, so I did that for 20 years. Yes, okay, here.
Here, just have it. Right?
Take all the stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it really was like that because I did a comic strip called Mama's Boys, and nothing was easy, but I have to say that all the failure that I got led me to this point.
Yeah.
You know, because you and I have had miserable conversations for years about, you know, not getting the opportunity to do anything. And, you know, I couldn't get, so my first thing was I wanted to be a cartoonist, right? I thought I wanted to be like the next great artist of Spider-Man because I always loved Marvel comics. I was always a Marvel guy. And so the first no was that my parents didn't let me go to art school.
Really?
Yeah. I took the test for music and art and design in New York City. And my mom was like, boy, you are not staying in my basement till you're 60. You know, I'm going to send you to a school where you can get a real job because being a cartoonist isn't a real job. It's a hobby.
Did your mom know some failed cartoonists to back up that? See that guy across the street? He's been 45 years in his mom's basement.
Selling pencils in a cup.
Yeah, I mean, because back in the day, you only heard the term starving artist.
Right.
Artists, it's starving artists. And then, you know, we might go to the movies, the Waverly Theater down the village, and there's a bunch of guys selling paintings of bulldogs playing poker on like these velvet canvases, and they were just like, And so it wasn't until watching Darren on Bewitched as an advertising copywriter that I was like, hey, wait a minute. You know, people are always like, oh, you're funny. You could come up with jingles and stuff, right? I was like, yeah, that's not bad. And looks like a real job. So when, so I couldn't get into art school. Now, is that people think artists should starve or is that they do starve?
I think a little both. Go ahead, Jerry.
So yeah, my parents sent me to a school called Fieldston in Riverdale. And so it's funny that, you know, 50 years later, I end up doing New Kid about a kid whose parents don't want him to be an artist, and they sent it to a predominantly white school in Riverdale. And this is the book that just, you know, puts me on the map. But when it came time to go to college, they realized that my, you know, it wasn't a fad, you know, and by then my parents were divorced, so I didn't have to go against the strength in numbers. I could just kind of, while they were fighting and doing their thing, like signing up for art school, And so I ended up going to School of Visual Arts in New York City. And the thing is, like I was always a Marvel guy, right? So I knew Steve Ditko and John Buscema and Jack Kirby and, Gil Kane and Gene Colan, like that. I didn't know Will Eisner, Harvey Kurtzman. And
that was before you. That was kind of like the generation before a little bit.
Yeah, but the thing is, they were all teaching at SVA.
Right.
And I didn't know that they were legendary. Like the funny thing is, half the legends that I met, I didn't know who they were until
like later,
after I had met them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, here's a cartoon class by Will Eisner. Okay, yeah, I'll sign up for that. And Harvey, I'll sign up for that. So I get there at noon to, sign up for my classes, not knowing that these comic aficionados had like spent the night in the, in the room waiting to sign up. So the 4 years I was at SVA, I was never able to take a cartooning class. With the exception of I took a coloring class and perspective form in space by Sal Amendola.
Okay.
But,
so the other people were there before you and copped all the spots.
Yes, absolutely. So the first year it was the choice between everyone did foundation. So I had to take photography, sculpture, media communications, graphic design, like everything, right? And then the next year they made you choose between fine arts,
right,
and media communications. And then the next year I had to choose between advertising or graphic design. And I took a copywriting class because it was a humanities credit, 3 humanities credits, as opposed to having to take the art of India in the Himalayas or something like that. I was like, hey, copyright, let me try that. Right. And I ended up really loving it. And then from then on, I actually majored in advertising copyright writing. And then my goal was I wanted to be like Don Draper, minus the sexism and racism and all that.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you were right. You were in the city for that.
Yeah, right. So I had teachers that were like, "Oh, I work at the Burnback, and I work at J. Walter Thompson. I work at Needham Harper Steers," and they were like, "Oh, if you can't work at DDB, don't even work. It's not even worth it. Don't work here. Don't work there." And then, right as I was graduating, the ad business literally went in the toilet. Well, not literally, but figuratively went in the toilet. Yeah. And because, Dorothy Burnback, who might have had Toyota, merged with Needham Harper Steers to become DDB Needham, and they had all these jobs that were the same. And then Toyota was mad because, wait, we're not staying here. And then they would leave and pull $1 million account, and then they would have to fire, 100 people. So then all of a sudden, I'm going for my first job with my portfolio, and I'm like, hey, this is my teacher applying for the same job. Yeah. And I remember going to, I think, Gray Advertising, and this woman said, "Oh my goodness, I love your portfolio. Hold on, I'm gonna make a call." No, actually, back then it was probably. Okay, well, no, it's just, hey, Mike, I have this young writer here, and it's the best young writer I've seen. And what advice do you have? Okay, I'll tell him. He says to get out of the business now while you can. And you talk about a wah, wah, wah. I'm like, I just spent 4 years getting my degree. I got a 10 on my portfolio. I got this, I got that. And you're telling me to get out of the business.
It's like the Hindenburg bursting into flames and slowly crashing.
Right. And as I have my ticket going, what? Oh, okay. So then I ended up getting a job as a copywriter at a very small ad agency. And when I say small, it was like it was like 6 of us, then there was like 5, then it was like 4. It was like me and my boss for years,
wow.
For like 8 years.
So what year was this? Was this like the early 90s?
Yeah, I graduated from SVA in 84.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so this is like, 85 to 90. I worked with my buddy Geraldine Lewandowski. She's the one that she created. Remember the logo for Airplane with that?
Yeah, with the
yeah, she created that.
That's great.
And she came from a place that was doing like Jordache jeans and stuff like that. So that was the time period, just to frame that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked with her for 8 years, and so I could write copy, I could draw storyboards, I did some radio spots, I wrote a lot of radio commercials. And then from there I left because we just kept waiting for that next big client, and it never came because we did a lot of fur coat stuff, the whole Fred DeFurrier family.
Mm-hmm.
And then that started, people started throwing paint on people with fur and all that.
Catch up on the fur coat.
Yeah. And then, so I left and I got a job at, I don't even remember.
you drew a blank there. It happens, man.
McNamara Clap and Klein on 5th Avenue downtown.
Wow.
And then they had like, a lot of fragrance ads, like English Leather and Heaven Sent. And so I would write copy for that. And then they had a lot of liquor ads, and then like within a year, they lost their biggest client. And then it was back to, I did write some stuff, and I actually did a voiceover for an English Leather commercial.
Wow.
Can you find that on YouTube?
No. I actually found it on cassette recently. So now I have to see if I can actually get that cassette to work and put it on something. So that
why don't you sort of explain to some of the viewers who might not be of the generation what radio is, or what copywriting is. I always use the example of Mr. Blanding's Builds His Dreams House, where if you're not eating Wham, you're not eating ham or whatever it was, the thing at the end. But a lot of people have no idea what copywriting is.
Right. And I have gotten some wild guesses over the years. So I remember one, I'm a copywriter. So that means like people write stuff and then you just copy what they write. Like, so like if I have this product, you could get it copyrighted for me. So copywriting is literally writing advertising body copy. So for example, my boss, who was there at the time, had written the Hanes ad. Hanes makes you feel good all under, and he was talking about, how he wrote it on a napkin in the bar. And it's funny, once I started watching Mad Men, half of them wrote their stuff on a cocktail napkin in the bar. I'm like, wow. So anything, like if you come in with a tagline, McDonald's, blah, 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 I'm loving it. Or, whatever, like that's called ad copy. And then you could write a TV commercial, you could write radio commercials, all that kind of stuff. So that was what I did for 8 years with Geraldine Lewandowski, 1 year at McNamara Clap and Klein. And then, every time I've ever gotten laid off, it's been like the day before Thanksgiving, or 2 days before Black Friday or Christmas, and people are coming over, and then hey, sorry, we're gonna have to let you go. So I literally got laid off, like, I think it was like right before Thanksgiving. And then it's like, hey, but you could still come back to our Christmas party. And it's like,
Jerry, you're gonna bring that rum cake, right, Jerry?
Yeah. And the thing is, when you get laid off in corporate America, they always send out these emails to people like, oh, Jerry Craft has decided to pursue other options, other career options. We wish him the best. And I had to learn to stop falling for that, because when I worked at another job, they did that. Like, oh, Jamar is, pursuing other things. Like, hey, Jamar, congratulations. Where are you going? I don't know. And it's like, wow, okay.
Now, at the same time, were you still like reading comics? Were you still into comics? Were you still into?
Yeah, I was, again, always a Marvel guy. I was really big into Spider-Man, anything that had Spider-Man. So Spider-Man and Marvel team up were my Jamar, can I use the word John here?
That's your John. Yeah, you go.
Right,
you have my permission, Jerry Kraft.
Okay. And Silver Surfer, like, one of my goals now that I have a regular paycheck again is to collect in its entirety that 18-issue first Silver Surfer. I have about 13 of them. I have 1, 2, and I think 1, 2, and 3. But one of my like bucket list things is to collect that whole set. And then comics got weird. Comics got older, and I started seeing fewer and fewer kids and more older guys, And then I remember as a kid, they used to have this like monthly convention at like the Pennsylvania Hotel in Manhattan. And I remember meeting one of my favorite Marvel artists. And this is before they were treated like celebrities. So I go there and there was nobody at his table. Right. And I went up and I was like, oh, Mr. So-and-so, can I have your autograph? And he's like, you gonna buy my book? And the book was like $15, which back in 1975 money was like $65.
Right.
And I was like, well, no. I'll tell you what, kid, come back in a half hour. Maybe I'll give you an autograph then.
Well, was this one of the old guard or one of the middle guard?
One of the old guard. And I was really disappointed by that. And kind of lost that fandom part of it, And it also changed me, because I know, like, when I go places, if there's 100 kids online waiting for an autograph, I'm like, well, guess I won't be home in time for dinner. But there's no one that's going to have a story.
You're like, that's $6,500.
Yeah, right. No, but no one. I don't want anyone like 30 years from now having that memory of me like blowing them off. So yeah, so I did start liking them, and then as I got older, my friends that like comics got a little weirder, and I was like, can I have both comics and a girlfriend at the same time? Because it seemed like people were having to choose.
Right, you had to give one up. Right,
you had to give one up, and I hadn't had the girlfriend.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I didn't see people that were like really straddling that line in a way that was cool for me. And
maybe it's the difference of fandom. If you're a fan and not an art fan where you're trying to turn it into your vocation. It's like being a fan of, I don't know, like NASCAR, and then actually trying to be a NASCAR driver.
Yeah. But, also, growing up in a black neighborhood, like.
Oh, that's super. Yeah, that's super important.
Yeah. You have to try to get as much cool points as you can from wherever, and I was, 5'1". All my other friends were 5'6". I was light skinned with straight hair. So I stood out there, talked like I went to private school, because I went to private school, and so it was really like, yeah, I need to kind of see if I can go on this path a little bit, on this journey, to kind of get some cool points.
Like a big tattoo across your chest.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting you brought that up, Jerry, because I used to say a lot when people would ask about where I came from. And I would talk about that in my neighborhood and a lot of people's hoods. At a certain age, everybody liked to draw. You'd sit on the stoop
Right.
with a stack of paper, and people would just go at it all day. And then all of a sudden, that wasn't cool anymore.
Right.
Right. And I think there's something to be said about
hormones.
Yeah, maybe it's puberty right there.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna. Can I share my screen?
Sure, whenever you're ready, Jerry.
So this is my me drawing on my Spanish homework. I was probably about the 7th grade.
Wow, you saved that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then this is like one of my first comic books. So this is me drawing the Beast from X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
This is my own guy. This is Iron Man, Submariner, and Ghost Rider.
Ghost Rider.
Yeah. And so, you see I was the writer, the artist, the inker, the letterer, and the editor. And the dude goes to the airport and he's flying to Egypt, and he, there's a lightning storm in the back, and he discovers this ancient pyramid and finds this ancient sword and holds it up over his head just as he gets struck by lightning, and gets these cosmic powers and uses it to fight crime. So this is like one of my first ever comic books. You see, Iron Man doesn't even have hands. I couldn't even draw hands.
His hands are behind his back.
He's so powerful. He's so powerful. He doesn't need repulsor rays in
right. Exactly.
That's so great.
Yeah. So that was Beast, and again Ghost Rider. I think I have Ghost Rider #1. I have like Iron Man 4 or 10 or something. I have some good comics.
No, you must see stuff like this when you go and do your talks. People bring up comics, and they bring up their own versions of comics, or maybe even versions of your characters.
Yeah, I do see a lot. Like if I see kids drawing new kids or some of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you see, so Pierre. So so I grew up with Pierre. I don't think Pierre drew though, but what was funny is when I came up with New Kid, I used a lot of my friends' names in the book. So the character of Mr. Pierre is actually my friend here, Pierre.
That's really cool.
So I used a lot of names from the book. Yeah, he didn't draw. I think my friend Carrie Bond and I made some comics and stuff like that. But the cool thing is that they never dogged me out for it.
Yeah.
They weren't like, oh, that's stupid.
Yeah. Because if you had friends like that, it could have changed your course.
Oh,
right? Because you would have like started to hide it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But because the thing is, we did enough stuff where it was cool. In other words, so I might have been upstairs reading, Marvel Team Up, and then break out, the Atari 2600, play a little Activision and some, Space Invaders. But then Pierre would be like, "Yo, Jerry," because no kid rang a doorbell.
Yeah, shout out to
right. "Yo, Jerry, come on, man, we playing stickball." Go downstairs, play stickball for a few hours. From there, go to the basketball court. From there, go to Jamel Manson across the street, play tackle football. So it wasn't like I was a recluse, so I would do the Atari stuff and, the drawing and the comics, but I actually had friends outside. We were like the little rascals, when we would go out. So even in Jordan's best friend around his block is named Kirk. And one of my best friends growing up, who I knew the oldest, longest, along with Pierre, was Kurt. So that's where that name came from. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I had a pretty well-rounded childhood. I wasn't, like a lot of cartoonists. That wasn't a happy time in their life. When I used to go to these National Cartoonist Society conventions, and it was
You would meet the old timers and to be all bitter about the old days and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Or yeah, my old man went to the war and never came back, and so I sat there and drew Fred Flintstone for 18 hours a day, and he became my best friend. And then my dad, blah blah blah. It's like,
yeah. The most of the cartoonists who work in and around New York, they were working class people. You look like Eisner and Kirby. Yeah. I mean, they had rough childhoods, and that was a way out of the ghetto, out of the projects, out of the bad neighborhoods. Was
right. You go to war. A lot of them were World War II vets, and like while they were in World War II, came up with, I'm gonna do this. It's Beetle Bailey, and it's like or like those kind, or even in advertising, some of the big ad guys, came back from war and started ad agencies and things like that. So, but it was, they had hard lives. I mean,
yeah, they came back on the GI Bill, and they were like they went and they would see an ad in the paper like, oh, such and such, one of the little publishers was looking for somebody. When you talk to the old guys, they kind of all knew each other because they all kind of came up going around. And we were talking before the podcast about comic strips. The guys in comic books wanted to be in comic strips because that was the big thing, and the comic strip guys wanted to be illustrators, and then the illustrators wanted to be fine artists. Like everybody wanted to jump up to the next. But for like the generation of the guys you were talking about, when they came back from World War II, they got into comic books, and then comic books started dying in the 50s, and a lot of them went into advertising, or if you were lucky, you got into a strip.
Right. And if you were black, you had to pretend that you weren't black. You had to pay someone to take your portfolio, so that they're like, oh, look, it's Campbell Soup's kid. This is great. Then why don't you come in? No, I'm good. I'm good. Just send the check. I'll send you the jar and you send me the check. So a lot of the black artists either had to go to Europe, like an Arlie Harrington, or they had to really like lay low and pretend. Sam Jordan, remember Jamar?
Like the guy did Crazy Cat. He just passed.
Right. George Harriman, right?
Yeah, Harriman. Yeah, he just passed.
Right. Absolutely. Now, if his name was Draymond Green, he probably wouldn't have ever gotten that contract.
Right.
A little too.
He would have changed his name.
Right. Exactly.
He would have changed. He would have changed his name. Yeah.
Right. So that was the kind of thing, but then the other thing that was always an uphill battle was that black characters were only for black people. In other words, like even so, when I created the Mama's Boys characters, right? And I had white friends, and they wanted to support me, and they would buy the T-shirt, and I'm like, hey, did you wear it? Oh, no. I put it up in the closet so it would be safe. Or, I would wear it to sleep in. But, you generally didn't see white people wearing black characters, But now if I wore Charlie Brown or Mickey Mouse or whomever, like that's not a big deal. Right. But it never went vice versa. And as a result, when I tried to break into comic syndication, it was the Highlander syndrome. Universal had their one black strip. King Features had Curtis. United had Jumpstart. Tribune had We Pals. Another one had Herb and Jamal. Detroit Free Press had Where I'm Coming From. And then there were, like
you got like maybe a couple more figures.
Right. And basically had to wait for one of them to retire, and no one ever retired because why would they? Like Ray Billingsley, who did Curtis for King Features, is still doing Curtis. And he helped me out a lot. But the thing is, like, I remember talking to Maury Turner, who did We Pals, who actually made it as far as anyone because his strip We Pals became Rainbow Power TV show. And I think he actually got the job directly as a result of the Martin Luther King assassination, because they were trying to like, hey, we're sorry, African Americans, we'll do it here. Let's give a black comic strip and laugh. And so things open up in a weird way.
Laugh. Don't be sad. Laugh. We gave you a comic strip.
Right. Don't be mad at us, And so as a result, but he said he and like Brunswick Brandon and Ollie Harrington thought that they were going through the door to open it, but they actually got stuck in that doorway and couldn't get through. So then you had Ray Billingsley, you had, Rob Armstrong, Stephen Bentley, and it was kind of a logjam. So with me, I just got nope, and I would get rejection from all of them. Wow, this is a really good comic strip. And I'm like reading it like this, like, okay, wait, slow your roll. We're not going to syndicate you. We don't know exactly why we're not going to syndicate you. Because it's funny, it's well written, it's well drawn. We don't know why, but we like that. That literally was a real response.
You don't know why? Wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I went through the same stuff. Like, part of my thing is I wanted to be a strip artist, and I have a drawer full of rejections, and one of them was we already have a black strip.
Yeah.
They would just tell you. They would just say, like,
there's multiple strips about dogs. So if you go in with the dog, go, wait a minute. You got 3 dog strips. Another dog.
Right.
There's always
that's what I always thought. There were 10 suburban comic strips. There was High and Lois and Blondie and this. There was Couples, like the Lockhorns and this one, that one. There was Garfield and, and it was just like, wow. And then some were just like Jamar, oh yeah, and then others like, so hey, a little information. So what do you put on your food? Ketchup or hot sauce? Hot sauce. What? Click. It's like, oh, that was, And then I remember I was working at King Features because I thought, okay, so let me back up. So I got laid off from McNamara Clap and Klein. And I went to School of Visual Arts. When I had gotten that job, and I gave the woman who was in charge of the placement office a bouquet of flowers, right? I came in like, here, this is for you. Like, what's this for? I just wanted to thank you for helping me. Wait, what? Yeah, I'm saying thank you. What is that? You're saying thank you? It's like, yeah, I'm like, okay. I've been in this job for like 20 years. I've gotten 10,000 students jobs. Nobody has ever come back to say thank you. And so years later, after I got laid off, or a year later, I went back to her and says, hey, there's this woman that is looking for an assistant artist. And because you're such a nice guy, I'm not even going to post it. I'm only telling you about this job. She's got some stuff from Marvel Comics, and I'm like, oh, I get to do Spider-Man, yes, finally. And so I call up, and I say, hi, can you tell me about it? And she says, oh yeah, it's kind of like Archie in ancient Rome. And I'm like, oh, Archie, I want to do superheroes. So luckily, my brother and sister had some old Archie comics, and I spent the whole weekend drawing Archie. So I made a whole new portfolio. So I went in Monday morning. So between me having a really nice portfolio, specifically with Archie, and the fact that the placement office didn't tell anyone else about the job, needless to say, I got the job. And that was with a woman named Barbara Slate. And Barbara Slate had done a groundbreaking story for DC Comics, which is way ahead of its time, but they had tried to do a girls line. She did a character called Angel Love, which was like really had some hard-hitting stuff in it, way ahead of its time. And then when I worked with her, I did the backgrounds on there was a series called Sweet 16, which was literally Archie set in ancient Rome. And I could not draw women to save my life. So she would draw all the female characters, and I would draw the male characters. Plus, I would do the background. So, like, if it was like the Colosseum or something, I would take 1,000 hours and draw every brick and and she wasn't interested in that at all. So here's a page. So this is one of my originals from Sweet 16, written and illustrated by Barbara Slate. So that is Archie.
Now, what year is this? What year are you doing this?
This is probably 91, something like that. And then she had worked on one of the first graphic novels I ever heard of, called Yuppies from Hell. And so this was also their thing. So, and you see, I know I did not draw her because, again, and then Sweet 16 had about, I think we did 5 or 6 issues, something like that. And I have the colors. And that was cool because, it was a comic that was printed by Marvel, and we got to draw the blue pencils. I learned about drawing in blue pencils. And then it got sent to, the editor, and it got sent to the letterer. And
I remember that now. Now that I see the cover, I remember that.
Let me take the plastic off so you can, not glaring.
So, Jerry, while you're doing that, let me ask a question. So at this point in your career, did your parents kind of like, give you the nod, where they're like, all right, Jerry, you made it. We know we didn't want you to be an artist. Or how did that go?
Yeah, I don't even remember. I mean,
because that was such a big part of your early story.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely didn't sabotage. Like, my dad was very I mean, both of them were, because by then I was getting tear sheets, so I would I had like a couple comics in like Ebony magazine, so that was a big deal, and so when I worked with Barbara, then yes, I did. And Mike, you're gonna be jealous. I also got to work on
wow, chilling.
You kids on the block chilling.
Wow.
Yeah, don't be jealous.
Yo, hang it tough, bro.
And you know what's so funny? Years later, right? So New Kids on the Block, they literally had 5 monthly issues. It was like New Kids, Chillin', New Kids, New Kids on the Block, super hype, they overdid. But it was Harvey. So I had done something that was printed by Harvey, working for Barbara Slate. Something that was printed by Marvel, again, working for Barbara Slate. And then while I was working for Barbara, I came up with the Mama's Boys comic strip. And then I sent that to King Features, and Jay Kennedy was their big. And the thing is, at the syndicates that time, there were like 5 Dons, Don Corleone, Randy, this one, and not that it was Mafia Run, but just that it was the big people that had ultimate power. So if they didn't like your strip, you would never get in syndicated, because
Jay was the man.
Because they had just total power. You know what I mean? So it's like,
they were kingmakers, those people.
Right. So it's like Galactus patrolled here, the High Evolutionary ran Universal, Thanos was at this one.
And what you had Hearst, you had King Features, you had Universal, you had United,
Tribune,
Tribune.
Right. And then to a lesser degree, like LA Times Syndicate. And then they came up with Creator Syndicate because creators were supposed to be more for the creators, thus its name. But that was it. And if you couldn't get in one of those, then you did what I did, which was start to self-publish. And I got
and people have to also realize that in order for you to take a spot, someone has to lose their spot. And if you lose a spot, the reader goes, hey, wait a minute, you took Ziggy out of that? Ziggy is the reason I buy the Chicago Tribune. If you don't put Ziggy back, I'm canceling my subscription.
Right.
Out of here. Right.
Oh, yeah, because I worked on staff at King Features, and I remember when they changed. So Jay Kennedy's assistant went on vacation the week that they changed the artist for Sally Forth. So they're like, oh, Jay, can you just mind the phones and don't. It's nothing's gonna happen, not a big deal. There must have been 2,000 phone calls that week. Hi,
wow.
like Edith Bunker type. My husband is very angry that you changed the artist for Sally Forth. And why is that, ma'am? Oh, I don't know. Archie, why? Like people took their comic strips very seriously.
They still do. They still do.
Because I mean, if they read them for 50 years, and all of a sudden, Gasoline Alley, you make them black, that is not going to go over well.
It's a weird business because you have people, like you said, that are loyal readers. I know there are people that read Judge Parker from 1953. There's people like my dad that have read The Phantom since they were kids.
Right.
And they know they can remember every story. They can remember stuff that nobody working on the strip can actually remember, but they are super fans. And if you take Peanuts out, even if it's reruns, they get mad because there's no Charlie Brown in the newspaper today. What the hell?
So imagine Phantom going, yeah, I'm a little old now. I can't do this. So I'm going to give, actually it's so funny. I have the ring here. Just put my prop.
There you go.
Yeah, slam evil.
Right. So I'm the Phantom, right? And I can't do this any longer. So I'm gonna give my magic ring to you, Jamar Nicholas. You are the new Phantom.
Hey, thanks, bro.
Oh my goodness, that would have created such an uproar.
The Phantom has his twin son and daughter. And the idea people assume is that at one point the son is going to replace the father, like all the previous Phantoms have.
Right.
But you never know. Maybe the daughter. And a lot of the old male readers are like, no friggin' way is some chick going to replace the Phantom, even though in the lore of the Phantom, there has been a female Phantom before.
Right.
But they're like, the other thing that people forget too is that the comic strips are international. So you don't have just people in America that like, Andy Cap. They like Andy Cap all over the world, wherever they carry it. The strips are international in the way that American comic books are not. I mean, they're more international now, but
right. So while I was working for Barbara Slate, then I saw that Jay Kennedy was looking for an intern, and I was like, if I could work for Barbara 3 days a week and then work for Jay Kennedy 1 day a week, then I can learn the ropes and maybe eventually I can get Mama's Boy syndicated, because in the rejection letter, he actually wrote, hey, this is pretty good. So I went there and I applied for the internship and I did not get it. And it was because I had already graduated. And,
right.
And he wanted to give it to someone who was still in school. So he gives it to this guy. Or he's about to, and then the guy's like, oh yeah, I'm about to drop out of school anyway. And Jay's like, well, if you're gonna drop out, I might as well get the guy I like. So they called me back and said, hey, do you want to do it? I was like, yeah, sure. And it turns out, so this is a funny story. And my friend Jim Keefe, if he's watching, So I was supposed to go in. Okay, so I was his intern, right, for a month or two. So then all of a sudden they said, "Hey, how would you like to go to 3 days a week?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be great, because I could do 3 days at King, 2 days with Barbara Slate. It's almost like having a full-time job." And so they tell me show up Monday morning, bright and early. So then Sunday night, the day I'm supposed to start, one of the guys, my boss, not Jay, one of the other, hey, Jim Keefe, there you go. I got a lot of Jim Keefe stories. He calls me up and says, "Hey, you know what? Don't show up at 9, show up at 12. We have to do something first." Like, okay. So I get there at 12 and they show me a new desk, and there is a cup of coffee at the desk that is still warm. So literally they had spent that morning firing the guy who I was going to replace.
Taking the cup of coffee right out of his hand.
And I'm like,
put it down.
Yeah, can I have a fresh cup, or do I have to finish this? So one of the things is, so whoever started there there were some jobs that were amazing, and then there were some that were not the best. So one of them is when the Prince Valiant comic strip, right, was always drawn vertically.
Right.
So the Prince Valiant strip was drawn, this way, right? But no papers ran it that way anymore. Mm-hmm. They ran it horizontally. Mm-hmm. So whoever had to do that, what you had to do was you had to convert it from vertical to the horizontal format, to landscape. Mm-hmm. And so you had to go and you had to make 2 photostats, one at 72%, one at 65%, and cut apart this is before computers. Is that right?
Right, yeah.
Cut it apart with the X-Acto blade, run it through the waxer, and you had to make a horizontal version of this strip.
You had to Tetris it.
Right. So
because you had to make the proof, because people should know that when you make strips, they would send proofs, and at that time, paper proofs to the newspaper. So it would be a piece of paper with an image of that day or that week's strips, and they would mail them out to all the newspapers all over the United States. So you were making the art that then would be converted into the proof that would be sent to all the newspapers.
Right. So yes, it was John Cullen Murphy. So phenomenal artist. So it's like, well, why don't you just ask Mr. Murphy to draw it horizontal? It's like that, that's why. So that was one of the worst parts of that job, and whoever was like the new kid got stuck with that, and then when they hired someone else, here you're in charge of that. My other job was I had to turn Andy Capp, your favorite strip, from a daily to a Sunday because he didn't do the Sundays. So I had a stack of old photo stats where I was like, okay, let's have, I don't know, Andy sleeping on the couch. And now let's have him walk to the bar, okay? And let's have, hey, here's one that Flo with a frying pan.
Mm-hmm. So you're basically jigsaw puzzling these Sundays together.
Yeah, and I would jigsaw puzzle the Andy Capp Sunday.
Jerry, our buddy. Jim says the guy Jerry replaced had retouched the Prince Valiant page and took it upon himself to retouch the art. Cullen Murphy was not happy about it.
Yes. So the guy, right? So it was his job to repurpose, to reformat the strip, right? And so there was a big space there. So instead of him blowing up and moving, the legend has it that he drew in a horse. Drew in. Okay. Now, John Cullen Murphy, amazing, right? And probably the quote print and the blah 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 blah. And this guy, I'm gonna exaggerate now, probably went in with a Sharpie and drew a horse that looked more like Sparkplug from Barney Google. and I can imagine, Mr. Murphy. Okay, let's look at the funny papers today. Let's see the head just explodes. So yeah, King Features was not happy about that, and that's how I got the job.
So Jerry, our buddy Mark Robinson says, I remember when Waterston renegotiated his contract. This is big news, so that his Sunday strips could not be changed or recut in any way. You remember that? Yeah.
So Jim Keefe, who just came on, so he did the Flash Gordon Sunday for years, and now he's doing the Sally Forth strip. And so, you have to learn about the drop panels. So you spend all the time doing this one big panel that most papers will just cut it and never run. Because some papers would do it like a half page, but then some would like fit 3 to a page, and then some would like reformat. Some papers would start the color strips on their own, and it's like, that's not how the characters look. So there was a lot of stuff going on. And so while I'm at King Features, in addition to doing the Andy Cap thing, my job was to work. So like in Blondie, if one panel Dagwood had long sleeve shirt and the next panel he had short sleeve shirt, I had to go in and fix the art. Or if there were spelling errors, I worked with Paul Hendricks, who was like the only black editor in the business at the time. And then again, Mike, you're going to be jealous.
Oh,
this is my hit from Heloise. Yeah, nice. Hints from Heloise. So what would happen? Let me see if I can get there.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. So I do this and actually put, these are probably the only black people that have ever been in the Hints from Heloise. What happened was they had an older artist there, and he would come in and literally draw it every week while he was there.
Oh, he drew it in-house.
In the bullpen. In the bullpen,
right. Yeah. And just like we had a guy that would come in, Freddie Schwartz, and he would hand leather like a dozen strips. He'd stay there the whole day, hand leathering.
Wow.
High and Lois, Hagar, probably not Hagar, but that kind of thing. And so there were some things that the older artists would do that, you're still drawing the dad with a pipe and like the Newsies hat, and they did not want to hurt his feelings at all. So he would leave, and then they'd be like, okay, Jerry, can you redraw this and can you blah, blah, blah? I'm like, okay. So I kind of had to secretly redraw some of these for a couple years. And then
he never noticed? He never noticed that you like, wait a minute.
Or he never said anything. It's probably
he didn't wait for you to come outside on the elevator like, hey kid, you better not be redrawing my stuff.
Yeah. I don't remember drawing Afro Americans in this.
Two things are the matron saint of our podcast, Mama Carla, says, I love strips. They help me learn to read. And you have a backstory about just reading in general. Maybe we could talk about that in a little bit. Yeah. But while we're on this subject, Jerry, Jim comes back and says, Jerry, tell them about how they had you change the background characters in that Spider-Man strip.
Okay, that's a good one. I actually have that, and I have to. I will pull it up. Let's see. Let me see.
You're sharing? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sharing again. Hold on, let me pull it up. All right, so one of the good things is that when I was there, I got to meet all these guys who I thought were legends at the time, So, and then I got to swap with them. So this is on my wall now. I've got, a Mort Walker original. Like, I love swapping original art.
Yeah.
Lynn Johnston, one of my favorites, and she actually wrote a forward for the Mama's Boys book.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So here you have it. here is Spider-Man, written by Stan Lee, drawn by Larry Lieber. And thought you'd get away with that. Thought you'd get away, huh? Take that. Spider-Man goes, someone's in trouble. If you want to fight, if it's a fight you want, try me. Spider-Man, don't hurt us. We're just playing. Now, how Spider-Man didn't realize that these were kids talking is beyond me. But hey, that's what happened. So, this was set to run, and then the LA Times, and I don't know if this was like Rodney King time or what, but people were trying to be more sensitive,
right?
And they felt uncomfortable having two African American kids playing with guns, even though they clearly space guns. And they really, I mean, this must have been a really slow day for Spider-Man to be like, wait a minute, I hear kids having fun. Of course, that's got to be Dr. Octopus and the Kingpin, right? Because they probably sound exactly alike. So LA Times did not want to run this strip with little black kids playing with guns. So they needed it changed or they would not run it. Now, it was too late to go back to Larry Lieber because, you know, there was no email back then. So he would have had to redraw it and then come to King Features and drop it off. So like, hey, Jerry, we need you to redraw this last panel with two little white kids as opposed to two black kids. And it was like, okay.
So white kids can have the guns and that's okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah. Like, yeah. Jamar, you know what that's like.
Yeah. This is just it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, right. And so I redrew this panel and we kind of snuck it on and it went to only the LA Times. Right? So not a big deal. And then somehow some reader goes, hey, because I just happen to have both the LA Times and the Houston Chronicle.
Oh, they
why is there
up.
black kids in Houston and white kids in LA Times? Next thing, it's this big thing with like, it ended up in like Comics Journal, and it was just really pretty funny. And then I asked my boss if he could get an autograph by Stan Lee and sent to me. So this is one of the ones that is up on my wall. So I got to work on the Spider-Man comic strip. I got to
finally
Spider-Man, kind of, sort of.
That's great.
I had to do the same thing a few times with just the Washington Post for Judge Parker, because it seemed like at that time the features editor at the Washington Post had it in for the way that I drew women. They were too sexy. So sometimes I would have to redraw their breasts. Once we had to take guns out of the strip, but I was like, but wait a minute, we've already drawn these characters in another storyline right before this with guns. So like, why now do we have to take guns out of it? But yeah, and so the syndicate is always worried that a paper like the Post will drop a strip. So even when you take over a strip, they
when
keep
Jim
the other guy there.
No, you're absolutely right. When Jim and I worked there, we had this big Popeye controversy that went, I mean, literally when we got to work, there were people like, if the press talks to you, do not say a word. Like, what? Just
was that the Bobby London? The Bobby London?
The Bobby London, yeah. I was working on staff during the Bobby London Popeye thing. And it was like, wow.
Jerry,
you want to tell people?
So Olive Oil had bought a baby Bluto doll. And there's a doll, and the doll just cried all the time and all this. And she's like, oh, this is the biggest mistake ever. And the sea hag is walking by her house, and Oliver goes, I don't want this baby anymore. And then the sea hag thinks that Olive Oyl is pregnant, and it becomes this whole, I will help you get rid of the baby. And all I know is my alarm went off. I was listening to 1010 Winds radio and getting ready to go to work. And it's like, hot water for King Features and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh my God, what? And I went to work and they were like, don't talk to press, don't talk to this, don't talk to that. And yes, papers would drop you left and right if you did anything, and you would like never gain that stuff again. You would never get those papers back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, about the only guy that probably had enough pull to screw the pooch, as they would say, would be Gary Trudeau.
Yeah.
He might be the only guy who could probably do that. But like when I took over Judge Parker, it was from Ed Barretto. Ed Barretto took over from Harold Ledoux, had done it for like 55 years or something like that. When Barretto took over from Ledoux, he signed Ledoux for a long time, even kind of ghosted Ledoux's style. And then when I took over from Barretto, I kind of ghosted Barretto's style and had to sign Barretto because they were always afraid that somebody would go, hey, wait a minute, who's this Ed Barretto guy? Nah, man, we're gonna drop the the strip. I don't know if they feel that way now.
Yeah, I had Mama's Boys dropped a couple times for angry letters that they got, and that's not a fun thing.
So how did you sell Mama's Boy? Let's jump to you selling the
very
the
poorly. Here's a Rex Morgan, MD. So I ended up really never being able to get Mama's Boys syndicated daily. And, it just didn't happen. And so they had this thing called the King Features Weekly Service. And, if you ran a newspaper, you could get I just want to show you. So this is a We Pals by Maury Turner. So you could see like working with, now I didn't work on this, but you can see the editor, like Birthplace had to be closed up. And so my job was to go in and like, fix these things and take the corrections and do that. So I really had a hard time. Here's Flash Gordon that Jim Keefe did.
Show and tell. I love it.
Yeah. And so it was just really tough to be able to get in anywhere because, no one really would say, yes, it is difficult for Black cartoonists, and especially like I would do some panels and it'd be all like 70-year-old white men with gray hair. And that's not, no, if you're good, you're going to get in. It has nothing to do with color. And then a few years later, when they started canceling a lot of the continuity strips, then, they knew what it was like. It was like, yeah, it's kind of difficult. It was like the gag-a-day humor stuff is what kind of took over. So I never really got the break that I wanted at King to get Mama's Boys syndicated because nobody ever retired, And then I got into King Features Weekly Service, which was like a collection of newspaper strips and like some reprints from like really old strips,
like Cats and Jammer Kids kind of
yeah,
stuff.
like Cats and Jammer, like Mr. Abernathy and
Love Is.
like those kind. And
Henry. Yeah.
Henry, absolutely. Henry was one of ours. And so you could take whatever you wanted and throw out the rest. Yeah. So Mama's Boys got put into that. So it got sent to 1,500 newspapers every week. All 1,500 could have run Mama's Boys, or 2 papers could have. So I never knew. So I would sit there during lunch sometimes and call up newspapers like, hi, you get the weekly service? Yes. do you use one Mama's Boys? Which one is that? Oh, that's the one. Oh, is that ethnic one? No, honey, I'm sorry, we don't have no use for that this part of the town. Like, okay, so that's a no. And so I never knew. So like some people would read my bio wrong. His comic strip is in 1,500 papers, which would have made me like peanuts. But yeah, so it's
it would have made you more than peanuts. It would have made you shekels.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is I was in the Stan Max Real Life Funnies. That's kind of cool. And so it was just very tough to get in, you know. And so I got a listing of Black newspapers across the country, and then self-syndicated for like 20 years, you know. And that was kind of what it was. And then years later,
how many Black newspapers were there? How many
Black newspapers? I got a listing of about 250, and I got in maybe at the height 15, which was not a lot, but you know, I had to photostat them every week and literally mail them out, you know.
Individually,
yeah. So it was horrible.
Jerry, were you in the Philly Tribune at all? I think you were.
Yeah, up until a couple years ago, up until New Kid. Once New Kid came out, I was like, dude, I can't be doing this anymore. It would be like a Friday night, you know, and I'm like, get ready to go. I was like, hey, you forgot to send us this week's strip. We're going to press. Like, oh, you know.
I was the editorial cartoonist for the Tribune for a minute.
Yeah, you know, so I mean, and it was cool, but it was just, you know, it was tough, and there was no money. And then I had done a comic strip that Jay Kennedy liked, and he's like, hey, I think you finally got something, you know. And this is one of the originals for Mama's Boys. He didn't like Mama's Boys. He never liked Mama's Boys. You know, but you know, I would do my originals and scan them into my computer.
What didn't he like about it? Did he ever kind of tell you?
I mean, the stuff that he would tell me, you know, like, oh, well, you're part of that Bigfoot school of cartooning. Like, really? Yeah, like the Mort Walker, that's not modern. I'm like, okay, but if I draw the feet smaller, will you syndicate me?
It's not that easy.
Then maybe, but it really was the Highlander thing. Like, if Ray Billingsley had retired, I think, you know, he might have signed Mama's Boys for that. So then I got married. I moved to Connecticut, and I did a comic strip based on my life of moving from, you know, a Black neighborhood to Connecticut and having white neighbors and doing this and being married and all that. And he really liked it. And then a couple weeks later, we get a thing, and it's freaking Boondocks that is being shot. And I'm like, oh my goodness, if somebody picks up Boondocks, it will be 10 more years until I can get another shot. And then so I'm drawing. Okay, how's this? You know, and then
you're scrambling.
I'm scrambling. It is Code Red. It is DEFCON 5. And then Universal Press picked up Boondocks, and then everyone thought that mine was a ripoff of Boondocks. I'm like, yeah, but Boondocks is an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old with their grandfather. Mine is a husband and wife. Yeah, but it's still Black people in the suburbs. So I just like gave up. I'm like, forget this. So one of my other jobs at King Features was writing body copy for existing comic strips. You know, so whenever they like relaunch, you know, if there's one thing that's mightier than his sword, it's his popularity now in 1,900 newspapers. You know, so I would write a lot of the, you know, these kind of things. Here comes the Piranha Club. Watch your back, watch your front, watch your wallet. You know, so
this is what they would either have their salesmen go out with, or they would mail to try to get that newspaper to buy their strip. pick up the strip.
So I think we launched 4 comic strips a year, 4 new ones. And then they would make these promotional brochures. I would write them and Jim would color them, and they would have samples. And then the salesman would literally go and meet with these people in person. And it'd be like, this is how you would get syndicated. You would submit like maybe 3 weeks, of daily. Right. And then so they would take these, and then they would do a couple of Sundays that they would then take. Right. And then, by the time it launched, hopefully you're in 150, 200 papers, something like that. And then so I would write this. So this is one called Buckles. He's not the family dog. He's family, And we did a relaunch of Tiger. This is one of my favorites because I love Tiger. Bud Blake is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Remember when kids were kids and growing up was fun? It still is, because that's kind of, anyway.
I forgot about Piranha Club. That was a spin-off strip.
It used to be Ernie.
Right, it was Ernie, then he turned it into Piranha
And then
Club.
they turned it into Piranha Club.
I remember that, yeah.
Jim Keefe, this is for you. This is Jim's favorite strip called Galacto Guys that I canceled after a couple months. Mike,
it's hard.
Andy Cap, I wrote that. Cap off your sales with Andy Cap. See what I did there? An extraordinary strip about an ordinary man. And
I guess
I wrote one for Malice Fillmore. Do you know that one, Malice Fillmore?
Yeah, that's a kind of it's still around. Yeah. The duck.
So he's a duck, and my line was the most controversial bill to ever hit Washington.
Oh, Terry Kraft, you're worth every cent.
Mr. Johnny Carson, see where I get that from?
That's wild stuff.
Yeah, so this
they don't launch news strips now, though. I think they tried to launch 1 or 2 in the last couple of years, but I mean, newspapers is not a growth industry, so it's really. I think that's why a lot of people, like we've interviewed on the podcast, have not tried to go to papers. They're going online.
Yeah, so that's my Ernie.
Oh, yeah.
And it's my original Spider-Man.
I like that one a lot.
So I got my record. So I really love swapping original artwork. That was really cool. And so you'll appreciate the Rex Morgans and
So would you meet the guys when the artists come into the syndicate back then, or you're mostly would go to like the
yeah, a lot of them would. I used to see Walt all the time. Ray Billingsley, Bob Weber Jr., Bob Weber Sr., Lee Falk every once in a while, Fred Laswell, who did Barney Google. And I thought that if I worked there, eventually a slot would open up and they would syndicate me daily, but that never happened. And then years later, when Aaron Magruder decided to retire from doing the strip, either I called Jay or Jay called me, and it was like, hey, so you always said you wouldn't syndicate my strip because it was too much like Boondocks, but now there's no more Boondocks. He goes, oh, yeah, you're right. All right, let's crank it up again. So I do new samples, and I'm doing all this stuff. And so I submitted, and he's like, I really like this. This might be it. I'm like, oh, my God, I am going to be syndicated daily. Like, this is my dream come true. And his executive assistant calls me up and says, hey, Jay is going on vacation, and when he comes back, he wants to have a meeting with you to set something up. I was like, oh, cool. And while he was on vacation, he drowns. And it was like, I got the call, like, wait, what? Wow. And then, you don't want to be the guy at the funeral going, hey, did Jay mention anything about a comic strip called,
Wow. Yeah, I remember that. Wow.
There was no record of it. There was no anything. And then I was just like, I'm done with comic syndication.
You had a long road there, Jerry.
That's Tiger, Bud Blake, one of my favorites.
Wow, you're killing them tonight. Well, there's some questions here, Jerry. Let's let people ask you questions. So JRD asked, was Mama's Boys was after Outside View, correct?
Yeah, okay, that's on either does his homework or is stalking me, because the Outside View was the first strip that I ever did, and it was kind of like a rainbow coalition of kids, like a Wee Pal, but teenagers.
Kind of like Wee Pals, right? Yeah. Uh-huh.
And but the thing is, when I started talking to Paul Hendricks, who is the only Black editor in comics, and he worked at King Features, said, too many kids. Why don't you take the main two kids and make them brothers? It's like, oh, okay. And then, well, what does the mom do for a living? And it's basically like, don't make her a school teacher or a nurse, because that's what every Black woman in every sitcom does, school teacher, nurse. And I said, owns a bookstore. I remember having lunch, and Ray Billingsley did the same thing. He actually invited me over his house, and he was like, this is how you push the envelope, this is how you do this. I mean, really, like, I couldn't have paid like a master class.
Yeah.
And then I rebranded the Outside View as Mama's Boys, and I think did about as well as I could from a self-published thing, and I sold my own hats, and I started publishing. I just want to show you last. So this is Mutts.
You got a O'Connell strip, yeah.
Yeah, nice. And then Marvin. So I ended up going to the library one year because I got just rejected. I went to the library. I found a book on how to self-publish, and in 1997, published my first book, Mama's Boys, as American as Sweet Potato Pie, was basically a collection of my Mama's Boys comic strips.
Nice.
And then 10 years later, I did my second Mama's Boys Homeschooling. And then the third was Mama's Boys The Big Picture. And Jamar, from by then going to Ekbach, East Coast, like at the Comic-Con or the Schomburg, like I had a new one of these, and and I just started doing other books. And then a lot of Black authors came to me like, dude, I can't get published either. Can you help me publish my book? So then I became like a one-stop
shop. Yeah.
And they would send me the script, and if I liked it, I'd tell them how much. I would illustrate it, color it, letter it, do everything. And over like a 20-year span, I ended up publishing about 3 dozen.
Wow. It's the stack. Yeah.
So every year when you saw me at Schomburg or somewhere, I had some kind of a new children's book. Some of them were chapter books, some of them were picture books. I self-published comic books.
You had a board game too, didn't you?
I did 3 board games. My first matching game. I Can Do Anything. Hats, T-shirts. So I really pushed it as far as I could. And then one day I woke up, I was like, I am freaking exhausted, because I always had to have a new book going. And so while I'm drawing your book, I'm negotiating with Mike when I'm going to do his book, and then as soon as that's done, I'm doing the next book. I'm doing Jim's book. And then I'm going to the Schomburg. I'm going to bookstores. I'm trying to get it. And I was like,
never a dull moment.
I'm getting too old for this. And then the good thing is I had met a lot of people in the industry, editors and people like that. And there was one woman that I called, like, listen, I need you to introduce me to some people that can unlock some stuff for me. And then so she gave me the name of a few editors. I sent out query letters, and they're like, hey, thanks, but no. And then months later, the woman who I met from Scholastic called me in and said, hey, why don't you come in and just meet with everyone? I was like, okay, I think it's a one-on-one. I get there, there's like 5 people in the audience. And I'm like, uh-oh. They're like, so what do you do? We're like, oh, I do this, blah, 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 do this, I do this. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like juggling and moonwalking and
spinning the sticks
and locking.
Yeah.
Not just locking.
And locking.
Right. And then it ended and they're like, so what else you got? I'm like, what else do I have? Like, have you ever thought of a graphic novel? I said, yeah, you know, I'm loosely, like I was planning to self-publish one about my life of being one of the few Black kids in an all-white private school, prestigious private school. And they were like, go on. And then that's why I met David Saylor, who was in charge of the graphics division. Really, I love meeting him, great guy. And he was like, he took me back to his office, like, have you ever read Smile by Raina Telgemeier? I'm like, no. And then, you know, he opens the safe and then washes his hands with holy water and is, and hands it to me, and like the light comes out like the Blues Brothers. And it was just like, you know, and that became my mission, like to do a middle grade graphic novel.
So this is like a whole division of comics that you were not heretofore paying any attention to.
No, because the graphic novels, like the ones that I had read, like the ones that Barbara Slade did, Yuppies from Hell, that was adult.
Right.
And then the first one that I really remember was Kyle Baker's Why I Hate Saturn,
right,
which I really loved. And then I don't remember if I read American Born Chinese before or after Smile. I think after. But that whole middle grade one, was just a whole new thing for me.
What about Captain Underpants?
Yeah, the Captain Underpants, I think, you know, I was reading Captain Underpants to my sons, you know.
But that didn't go off in your noggin. You didn't think like, oh, hey, wait a minute.
I had literally the rejection letters that I got were so nasty. Like back in '97, you know, literally an editor wrote a handwritten note like, I don't know where you think you're going with this Black sitcom style of stuff, but this is not gonna fly. And I literally thought then that doing a book with Black characters would not ever be traditionally published. So I literally gave up. And, you know, I was like, I'm going to self-publish the rest of my life. And then I met the woman from Scholastic and met David Saylor. And then a couple months later, out of the blue, I got an email asking if I wanted to illustrate the 0 Degree Zombie Zone, written by Patrick Henry Bass and edited by Anja Pinkney. So this is the first book that I ever actually did for, you know, one of the big boys, you know. So then Scholastic would send me on tour, which was a new thing, that I wasn't sleeping on someone's couch or, you know, hopping the freight train with Lee Marvin and Ernest Borgnine.
You just dated yourself there, son.
with my little stick with the
bindle.
Like, dude, you can't just carry
Ernest Borgnine's not trying to throw you off the train with a chain.
Yeah, exactly. And they were like, yeah, you know, you could drive down, we'll reimburse your gas and tolls, and we'll put you up in the hotel. And I was like,
what?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
And you're not taking your soup in a boot in the parking lot?
Yeah. You know, and now, granted, every once in a while I still get a taste for soup in the boot, but, you know, so I went to one of the first places they sent me to was the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. And I'm in there, and there's like Gene Yang from American Born Chinese, Raina Telgemeier, you know. So me and Patrick Henry Bass, we in the auditorium. Our thing was first, and there's like 50 people there. And then all of a sudden, you know, like halfway through, the auditorium gets like more and more crowded. Like, well, they ain't here to see me. And then the person after us was like Raina Telgemeier. And now there's 200 screaming young girls holding Smile, Drama, Sisters, Ghost, one of her wonderful books. And then she finishes, and then it's like 300 screaming 40-year-old men holding Scott Pilgrim, going, you know, and they're like, oh my God, this book changed my life. Like on page 47, when Scott says, and I'm like, wow. And then like after him, it was like Jeff Smith with Bo, and it just, and then I think Jeff Kinney was there.
It's very different. It's different than being at any regular comic book convention, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, hanging out in the artist alley, as opposed to seeing Jeff Kinney with 500 million people, like the new Star Wars movie is just opening, like the line. Like I hung out with Raina Telgemeier in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we were at the Ann Arbor Comic Book Fest. And she was in the basement, right? We were in the basement, and her line went from one end of the basement all the way down, up a flight of stairs, and they wrapped around 4 flights of stairs, going to basically the top floor of the library. I had never seen anything like that.
But the crazy part about all of this, Jerry, is still, if you say Raina's name and your name in some places to somebody at the comic book store, they're like,
I don't know who. Did they
right,
do Deadpool?
Like they have no idea what you're talking about, or don't believe.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I. It's so funny. One of the things I like is that unless you're at a convention, no one really recognizes you. And I know this sounds name dropping, and it is, but not in that way. Like I had dinner with Jeff Kinney like a month ago, and we like try to go to this restaurant, and there's no tables available. They're like, oh yeah, you guys have to wait, and like, you know, he could literally write a check for this restaurant and buy it and clear it out, you know, and no one knew who either of us were, and
right.
You know, or walking down in San Francisco or Raina Telgemeier, no one knows us, which is great. But when you go someplace, then they see. That's kind of cool.
I think. No, go ahead, Jamar. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I just wanted to throw this in. My good buddy Shannon Newby. Shannon's an amazing filmmaker. And also, we went to high school together. Kappa Stand Up. What up, Shan? Shannon says, I don't think we'll ever get past the idea of we have a black comic already mindset of publishers. Is self-publishing the only way to go early on? So I'll ask both of you, since you both have hands in those worlds.
So first of all, I have to say that at ECBOC, Shannon showed his films, and my oldest son got so obsessed. You know, I had to reach into my pocket and buy Shannon's DVD, and he watched that thing over and over.
Heavy sedation.
Yeah, heavy sedation, absolutely. You know what? Okay, so I'm gonna skip forward to New Kid, and I'm gonna explain where I'm coming from with that. So New Kid got passed up like 5 times. I actually had signed with a publishing company, and like a month before it's supposed to come out, they fired my editor, got rid of the whole imprint. I literally had to cash in a 401k, buy back the rights to New Kid before I could send it elsewhere, because they would not even let me show it unless I returned my advance. And I did, that money was spent. So I had to buy it back. And then in January 2017, I signed with HarperCollins. So I drew every day from like January 2017 until February 2018 of like 18-hour days for like a year. I handed it in February of 2018. And then in about October of 2018, I saw the advanced reader copy. And so the advanced reader copy, and this is the stuff that you can't do as a self-publisher. you know,
Right.
not go to some kind of a bookstore or BEA or anything and give out 150 copies.
Right. You can't do that.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, because you see someone grab a copy, you will chase them down and get your book back.
Mm-hmm.
But I signed at BEA, and I was, you know, that was a bucket list thing. I'm on the you know, I'm sitting there, and there's 150 people online, and I have people just handing me the book, and I sign it. Oh, where you from? Oh, what's your name? Jamar. Okay, there you go. You know, that they gave out like 150 of these, like everywhere I went. So you can't do that as a self-publisher. And then these people go back as honeybees. They have your book, and then they fly back to Chicago, you know, New Mexico, wherever. And then
are they librarians? Are they librarians and people like that?
Yeah. So then by the time your book is coming out, they are waiting for it.
Yeah.
And then I gotten 5-star reviews, School Library Journal, Kirkus, Publishers Weekly. So now the buzz is really big. And then by the time it comes out in February of 2019, it's starting to do pretty well, you know. And I'm going on a little tour, not much, you know, New York, Boston, Philly, DC, you know, and they're still putting a lot of work in. And then word starts to spread, and it picks up. And then I did, you know, a one-on-one with Raina Telgemeier, which is great. And then so people see me because I'm, you know, on stage with her, and then doing stuff with Jeff Kenny. So it's like, who is this guy? And the Scholastic Book Fair picks it up. You know, I also got a cover blurb from Jeff Kenny. Funny, sharp, and totally real. Jordan Banks is a kid everyone will be talking about. Jeff Kenny, author Diary of Wimpy Kid, which was amazing. And then a year later, in February 2020, of getting the phone call that I had won both the Newbery and the Coretta Scott King Award. So all that is very long, Shannon, but like that's why the self-publishing thing just can't compete in the aspect of how much money that they will put behind you. Like I went to, you know, Seattle. Was that Seattle? Yeah, I was somewhere for like the Winter Institute, Albuquerque, New Mexico, for Winter Institute. And it's thousands of independent booksellers from across the country. You know, while I'm there, I'm meeting other authors, you know, took a picture with Kobe Bryant and he tweets something. And it's just like boom, 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 you know, and then getting the awards. And I'll show you that this is the actual.
Oh, hold on, Shannon. You gotta leave the screen. Hold on.
Yeah.
We gotta see the medal. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Shannon.
But I am answering you, Shannon.
Yeah. Sorry,
right.
Shannon. All right, hold on. Right. Let's see that.
Yeah, so this is the actual medal. So it is the actual medal. So the actual
oh, you pulled it out the case. Well, look at that. So
yeah.
and also for people who don't know this, that Jerry made history by being the first graphic novel to win the Newbery Award, and also the first African American graphic novelist to win it.
Yeah, so it was the first graphic novel in its 98-year history.
Yes.
Only 5 African Americans have ever won it. Me, Kwame Alexander, Mildred Taylor, Christopher Paul Curtis, and Victoria Hamilton. And then also won the Coretta Scott King.
What do you have behind your desk, man? You got everything back there. That's awesome.
So only the second book to ever win both of those in like 100 years. And then
that's the Kirkus, right?
Yeah, that's the Kirkus. That's the Kirkus Prize.
That's a gorgeous trophy.
Yeah.
Look at that.
And man, I had to fly this home on the plane, and they're like, can you take that out the bag, sir? I'm like, man, please don't let this be filled with some kind of liquid, and then they're going to be like patting me down and stuff. So I don't know, I never got the support that I wanted as a self-publisher. Like, I thought that if I had 5,000 Facebook followers and 10,000 Twitter followers, that like, if I do a new Mama's Boys book, right, that if I got a fifth of those and I got like 500 orders, that would pay for the printing, that would pay for this, that would pay. I'd get like 7 orders, next month, maybe 3 orders.
It's tough as a self-publisher because you have to do all the stuff that you were talking about. But it's also, here's that thing, and Jamar and I have joked about it before. It's sort of like there's a bit of a stigma to being a self-publisher because sometimes people figure like, well, you're not really good enough to be a real publisher.
Yes.
So you're a self-publisher. And so you see those people that you go to the typical Comic-Con and there's a guy and he's sitting there and he's got his little, and they just look.
Yeah.
The million like area.
Like people walk farther. Like, oh fuck, I don't want to make eye contact with that guy.
Right.
I don't want your book.
Yep. No, absolutely.
And then you think you're right that okay, I got 10,000 followers. If I can get, like you said, 5%, 4%, and they all say, "You got a book coming out? You got a new book coming out? I want to buy your new book," and they don't show up.
They don't buy. And then they want a free copy. Like, "Hey, Jamar, here's my new book." "Oh, thanks, man." I'm like, no, that's not. And I got to say, so when you talk about averting your eyes, it's even worse for some reason, again, as an African American, because if you're at a book fair and you're the only Black author, if you see a Black family come through, they will not look you in the eye because they will feel such guilt, like, oh my God, he's the only Black guy here.
I guess
Come on, brother. Come on, brother.
Yeah. So they will check their phone. They will this kind of thing. And it's like, I don't want to be obligated to buy his book. But the funny thing is, since I won all of this, right, and got the validation, the books that I had self-published, I have probably sold more of these as my backlist. So the Mama's Boys book that I practiced to see if I could do a 250-page book, and I turned my hand lettering into a font using Fontographer. So it's all, it looks handwritten, but it's not. And then the other book that I did, The Offenders, Saving the World While Serving Detention, I sell more of these now with people just Google searching me like, oh, who's this new guy? And what else is he got? Than I did when I was actually trying to sell them myself.
Because everybody loves the person who's successful. Nothing sells success like success.
Yeah.
Guys, I have a room full of questions and we're running short. So I'm going to try to blast some of these through. So speaking about the offenders, Jerry, and I'm sorry, it seems like JRD has a monopoly on the questions. There's a couple more in here. JRD says, Jerry, what was it like creating a book with your kids?
I mean, that was really cool because, like, I didn't want to be the old guy at the club that not knowing what was going on. And they would literally come back and be like, oh, Dad, this is what happened at school today. And, and I didn't want to have a character where, they're playing Space Invaders and they're Atari 5200 and stuff like that. So they really kept me like, this is what kids do, because we didn't grow up knowing that if I unfollow you on Instagram, that's like throwing hands back in the day. You know what I mean? So they really kept me. So many moms, when they read the book, they were like, oh my goodness, it was like looking at my kids. And I think that they've always given me balance and really helped me to, because even I won't make fun of myself, right? If I'll say stuff like, and they'll read something like, hey, fellas, like, Dad, nobody says fellas. That's an old guy term. So then I will have the dad say, hey, fellas, and like, Dad, nobody says that anymore. So I will have the kids and new kid make fun of the parents like they will make fun of me. Like, oh, that's a dad joke. No one says play date anymore, Dad. Or like hooking up. That used to be thing. Oh, yeah. Yo, Jamar, let's hook up next week. Dad, you can't say hook up.
That means something else now.
Totally different now. So, all right, I'm going to show more stuff while answering questions.
All right. So I'm trying to keep up with you, Jerry. So give me a second. So going back to the one black comic thing, JRD also asks, regarding the one black comic already question, is that a quota or prejudice against the creators or the readers? So who's the gatekeeper here? Is it, and I'm kind of answering JRD's question a little bit, is it the gatekeepers are the syndicates or the person saying, no one wants this? Or is it their misconstrued data, or are they just plain out racists? Like, what's really going on behind the scenes here? Because it's starting to change.
They haven't changed their data since the 1960s. They literally still think that black characters are for black people.
Yeah.
And, I mean, the fact that, and again, we've always been like more self-deprecating than anything, you and I, when we talk, right?
Yeah.
And talk with Tim Fielder. And now I tell Tim Fielder, like, dude, stand up straight. That is a great book. Infinitum is a great book. Own it. And same thing with you. I'm like, dude, Leon is funny, right? Mm-hmm. And so the fact that in the first time where a publisher let me loose, I won the Newbery, Credit Sky King, Kirkus, and New York Times, so that it's critically acclaimed and it's making money. Mm-hmm. Hopefully that opens the door where now they're like, yo, Infinitum, yo, Leon, yo, what else we got? Mm-hmm. And then seeing people like Keith Knight with his, with Woke on Hulu. I'm negotiating to do a Mama's Boys movie with LeBron and Maverick Carter with Spring Hill for Universal Pictures. And now I think seeing what Into the Spider-Verse did, what Black Panther did, making $1 billion, it's like, so in the same way that we knew about music, that, there are little redheaded girls in Iowa, with Migos on their phones, they're like, oh, let's actually catch up. I think TV was way behind. I think shows like Atlanta have really been amazing. And then they're giving it more opportunity. So when you have in Atlanta, then it's like, oh, hey, let's do Watchmen. Right. Watchmen does good. Let's do Lovecraft Country. Like,
right.
Oh, so we can actually make movie because, I have people from Korea reading New Kid in Korean. This is about a little black boy in Washington Heights, drawn by a little black boy in Washington Heights. So human stuff is human stuff. And I would like that we get past the fact that the only black stories are slavery, civil rights, and police brutality.
Struggle narratives, as I like.
Right, struggle narrative, absolutely. Yeah. Where I wanted, my goal with New Kid was to do, characters that could stand with Wimpy Kid, Captain Underpants, that kind that maybe one day you'll see as a Thanksgiving Day float or something like that. Because in my lifetime, there's been Fat Albert and almost nothing. That's been like 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. The fact that as popular as that was, everyone my age watched Fat Albert. Didn't matter nationality, age.
Either whether you liked it or not, you still watched it.
Yeah. And so how come no one copied it? No one tried to, 30 years later, you had Baby's Kids for a minute and Proud Family, and Boondocks, but there's not that one that made it like a Fat Albert made it,
Mm-hmm. And I will say without a doubt, and I've said this to you off camera, Jerry, that I think the success of Leon getting to where it is right now. It is definitely on the heels of New Kid. I think that it's one of those rising tides scenarios where
that
I think
all both, and that was the reason why I co-founded the Schomburg Black Comic Book Fest, was because I felt like even us, we thought of the Highlander syndrome. Like, if you get too close, I'm going to push you off the cliff because it can only be me. I'm pushing you off the stage. But, you see David Walker, you see this one, you see that one. It's like, yeah, we can all have a piece of pie, and this time the pie can actually be sweet potato.
Yeah. I mean, I had some discussions about this when I was in school with a couple of older Black guys, and we were talking about, like, in the Black community, it's hard. It's easy to get support for sports and music. It's hard to get support for visual arts because it's not something that in the community, it's like, oh, what, you having an art opening? What's that all about?
Right.
Not so sure.
And it's super competitive because the slice of the pie is so small.
Yeah.
I remember going to other cartoonists, Black cartoonists, who I was like, oh, yo, the quality of this paper is really good. Who's your printer? Oh, I don't remember. Wait a minute. You tell me you wrote a check for $2,000 to a company and you don't remember who your printer is? But they don't like to share. But I could call up Raina Talgamai and say, hey, Raina, who's your agent? Oh, here's a number. Who booked your school visit? Because when you have stuff, you can give stuff. When you don't have anything, you just want to hoard it. And by co-founding the Schomburg with John Jennings, John Gale, and Deirdre Holman, we wanted to show the fans, listen, if you want us around, you have to, plop down some cash to have us survive, because it's not fun. It is a career. And also to have, like, dude, Jamal Igle, Jamar Nicholas, Tim Fielder, Alex Simmons, Jennifer Coutey, like, the better one of us do, like, look at Keith Knight. Now, if that does really well woke, and yes, we should all watch it, then they're like, hey, maybe Leon as a live action show, or as a cartoon. Yeah. And it just shows, as opposed to us sabotaging it. Right. And then it's like, now there's nothing. So this is right here is New Kid in Albanian.
Oh, hold on a second.
Yeah, pull that up if you can.
All right. Wow, look at that.
Right. This is in Korean. So that's the actual word balloons in Korean. And then that's the follow-up for Class Act. When school gets real, you can still show the world you're a Class Act. Companion to the Newbery Medal winner, New Kid, Jerry Craft, New York Times bestseller. And then back in November, to actually have the #1 and 2 New York Times graphic books and manga was just absolutely like nothing that I could have even imagined with as vivid as my imagination has always been. It's just not something that, I saw coming. And I want to say before I go, so the colors on with New Kid. So, and again, trying to, bring people up with you, right? So one of my buddies, Mashindo Kuumba, one of the best illustrators I've ever met, he was gracious enough to do some of the color for New Kid. So in Class Act, each of the chapter headings is a takeoff of a book or a movie. So this is like a pie. And I mean, look at the freaking water that he did. I just let him do him. Look, these chapter headings, you do full Machindo, and he just knocked it out of the park. And then this chapter is called Affinity War, because they joined in affinity group. Yeah, and just stuff that he just went crazy with.
I'm smiling because Mashindo is so amazing, and everybody in our cosmos knows about Mashindo, right? But he still seems like a secret.
Yeah, and I wanted him to. That was actually this is him doing Wesley Snipes' Blade.
Oh, right, I remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely amazing stuff. And I just wanted to, get him out there into the big stage if I could help in any way, and I just want people to see that. So all props to him.
Jerry, Tim Fielder says, I would say that this is changing. And I was going to say that, Tim, you beat me to it. The tide is changing. The winds are changing. Jerry's proof positive of that. Things that I'm doing, Tim's new book looks amazing. I haven't read it yet, but I can't wait to get my hands on it. Tim says, I would say this is changing, or at least I could say that reaction to Infinitum in the Black community is absolutely amazing. I hope it's a sign of change. And I wanted to kind of give a shout out to kind of like the new generation of people that I'm seeing coming up real heavy, like Jason Reeves, Greg Elise, and like all of those cats who are just doing like, it's like the stuff I wish I could have done when I started 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We hadn't figured out the formula yet. Right.
Yeah,
and
Tuskegee Airs.
Yeah. Tuskegee Airs is amazing. Like the stuff is bubbling, and the quality is so like AAA+ that you can't look away from it, So like all that stuff.
In Infinitum, I was, Tim invited me to do the cover blurb for it. So I got a sneak peek of that and was like, okay, Tim Fielder. And it was like 3 years ago that we went to Teachers College to do something with Deirdre Holman. And we just went in a pizza shop and talked for like 3 hours till they were like mopping the floor. But, like it was before New Kid blew up and, I didn't really know. And then fast forward 3 years from now that, he's got this book that's out, that's absolutely amazing and well received. And, and he's got some other stuff that's in the pipeline. So to see him and you and Keith Knight and, David Walker, and it's nice to actually be happy for people and not like, oh, I wish, Jamar didn't have that because he got messed up for everyone. And that's what people in the book industry, like the Kwame Alexanders and Jason Reynolds, have kind of brought me in when I was the new kid and showing, yeah, dude, you do belong here, and so I'm definitely grateful to them as well.
Wow, this was great, Jerry. I don't know where the time went. It's already 2 hours. You did a great job. Mike, do you have any last things for Jerry?
I was just going to say that looking back and looking at where you are, do you have people coming up that are the 20-year-old Jerry Crafts, people coming up and saying, well, now that I've seen you, because one of the things about about when you brought up Black Panther was that it was something like there had never been Black superheroes before. Like all of a sudden he just like, that was the narrative, the way they were sort of pushing it in the media, Not that it was created by two middle-aged white Jewish guys in the 1960s,
right.
But like, somehow he like. But do you have, a 17-year-old coming up and go, hey, I want to do this? Because the path that you walked and I walked and Jamar walked, that path is really gone now because that era of publishing is really, you don't break into comics doing that stuff now. So you break in with doing the web comics, you break in with doing the webtoons, or people going like, well, how did you get this thing as a graphic novel? That's what I want to do. I want to start out making my own graphic novel. Do you have people coming up and asking you about that?
Yeah, I do. And it's really weird. And I'm definitely going to go generational now because like I remember, again, being with Jim Keefe at the Reuben Awards one year. And I look over and there's Charles Schultz standing with Lynn Johnston. And I'm like, dude, let's go over. He said, oh, we can't go over there. Come on. So I kind of twist his arm and we go over and we're like humble, like Mr. Schultz, Mr. Johnson, big fans, love your work, blah, blah, blah. And, but, given their props. And I get stuff like, yo, man, here's my new project. I need some eyes on this.
Yo, I need your contacts.
Yeah,
Jerry, you hiring?
Yeah, I just wrote 25 book series. I need an illustrator. Hit me up. I think you do good work. And it's just like there's no like, what I mean?
No respect. No respect.
Right.
It's real. That's a real thing.
Yeah, it's like, yo, Donald Glover, I want you to do a New Kid live action for your show. Put me on it's like, come on. Right. And so in some aspects it's so much easier now, because when I first did my first Mama's Boys book, there was no print on demand, so I had to order 2,500 copies that stayed in my garage until I sold them. So I'm like, either I'm going to bust my butt and sell them, or I know what everyone I know is getting for Christmas for the next 20 years. You know what I mean? And so that kind of thing, it's just like, just more humble with certain things, and not like I'm not worthy, but like, okay, hey, Jamar, I'm a big fan. Do you think you can offer me, can you look at this, as opposed to just, I need eyes on this.
Yeah.
So your advice is to be polite.
Yeah. I mean, I literally have 8,000 emails in my box now, and probably half of those are requests. And I try to read. I mean, I read all my emails. I can always get back to it. But, if it's a kid and the mom's like, oh, my son drew this, what do you think? But not the ones where, can you get my son a job at Disney? I'm like, how old is he? 11. And, you don't really see many kids writing books for Disney. No, you don't see any. I couldn't even write a book for Disney. Like, maybe now, but I did some stuff. I can't just, hey, Walt Disney, I want you to meet young Lester James from Bridgeport, Connecticut. And he's got a new, if you approach me realistically, I will answer you realistically. Like, hey, this is what I think, but some of the requests are...
That's crazy. And I think there's like, and I've said this before, and this is kind of like some black stuff, but it's back at one of my old day jobs. I'm sitting at this university and I'm taking a break, and I'm standing on a landing, and I have a tie on and like slacks, like I have a job. And this guy just walks past me off the street. And he looks up and goes, yo, they hiring?
That's how I got this job right now.
You have no idea what I do. But because you saw me here, it must be something accessible. You know what I mean? That's kind of like our experience. It's a lot of that. It's like, oh, well, they gave you that metal thing, Jerry. I could get one of those. Yeah. Where do I sign?
And can I tell you that one thing I am still learning, and you guys specifically, I will say that I have learned as much from pencil to pencil as I've learned anywhere. And I'm not just blowing smoke, right? I'm listening. I'm like, oh, right, tangents. Because remember, you guys did a big thing on tangents. And I was like, I had kind of forgotten about that. And I go look through, like, oh, yeah, that line cuts right into his eyeball, and I start refocusing that. And then the dude that did the Ren and Stimpy backgrounds, he showed the backgrounds, like, oh, those are hot. I love those. So when I'm watching as a fan and going, how do I get better? I'm like, oh, I see how you did that whole thing about the perspective of the street and all that stuff. So I'm always learning, and I think that's why Class Act is even better than New Kid. I'm working on the third book now. I hope that's even better than Class Act, which is better than New Kid. But you're never too old to learn. But there are people that are like, I learned. Like, this one guy used to come up to us at conventions, and I'm like, dude, hey, I'm like, I see you have problems drawing hands. I can take out my sketchbook and show you how to draw. Nah, man, I know how to draw hands. Why you say that? because literally every character has their arms folded behind their head or in their pockets.
Yeah.
Every single character. So even if someone is pointing, they're like, yeah, over there.
That's amazing.
And he got upset that I offered help. And I'm like, I wasn't getting anything out of that. I'm showing you how to draw hands in 5 easy steps, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, dude, you do you. And when he was 17, he was cute. Now when he's 34, still cute. Coming over, I'm like, dude,
it's not cute anymore.
He's not cute anymore. You know, where's security? Now he's the dude coming to you, go, yo, you're hiring?
You're hiring? Right. And the last thing we'll say about this, and this has been great, is that no matter where you are in the game, if you're at the beginning of this looking up and like marveling about your great career, Jerry, or you're somewhere, you know, above us looking down like, oh, you old gray beards. You're still young. What are you talking about? There's always something to learn, right? And that's, again, like you said, is one of the big things I love about this podcast. We all educate each other and learn from each other. So I really appreciate you being on, Jerry. You're a fantastic guest. I always love your stories. There are a lot of people in the room who are like, yo, I don't even have a question. I'm just here to listen to the story.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about, listen to here. One day it's perspective. One day it's snowfall. One day there's a crying right in the garbage cans. I just never know what
that was one of my favorites.
We'll get from you guys. You know, talk about some donuts, Krispy Kreme, pizza, cheesesteaks. Okay, I'm in.
Now I'm hungry. Jerry, where can people find more of your work or how to purchase some of your award-winning books?
Your catalog.
Yeah, I am literally fortunate to say that you can find New Kid and Class Act a lot of places. I mean, it's in Target. There are Walmarts. Some people have seen it in Costco, anywhere online. And on social media, everything is my name, Jerry Craft, JerryCraft. So my website, jerrycraft.com, Twitter, Jerry Craft, Instagram, Jerry Craft. So pretty easy to find, you know. So I'm not like, you know, Chocolate Bonbons 42 on Instagram.
That's my name.
Yeah, I know. You know,
Jerry, last thing. Stephen Payton says, and hey, Stephen, how are you, bro? I am loving this. Thanks so much for having Mr. Craft on. I actually saw this book at Target and was like, I think my daughter might like this. Now I'm definitely going to go cop.
All right. Well, thank you.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Changing the world one book at a time. Thank you so much, Jerry Craft. All right, you guys, that's our show. Mama Carla says, love you, Jerry. Great
Thank
to
you,
see
Mama Carla.
Jerry, you know you got to do Kirby hands with us, so hang out.
Now I really made it.
All right, you guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us for our disembodied face above the clouds, Brett Blevins. Hold on, Jerry, relax. Smiling down on us for my bud Mike Manley. I'm Jamar Nicholas. We're Jerry Craft. Oh, next Wednesday, our guest is Jimmy Robinson. I'm really excited to talk to Jimmy Robinson. He's one of my favorite Black comic book artists.
This Ditko hands.
All right, you guys. See you next time. Don't forget to wash those Kirby hands. Give it to him, Jerry Craft. Yeah. I love it. Nice form. Thanks, you guys. Have a great night.
Go to bed.